Welcome back to the Senior Focus. Again, I'm Nick Coltis, your host. I'm here with Donna Ostiguy, and we're going to talk about ways that people discipline their children today.
Different subject, Nick.
It's a different subject, but you know what? It's kind of an important topic because it's just not the same as it used to be when we were growing up, I don't think.
Certainly not.
Do you spank your children?
Gosh, not now. They're in their 20s. No, I can't say.
It would be a problem if you tried,
It would be
huh?
a big problem, yes.
Yeah.
I have to say, I was brought up with a police officer dad,
Yeah.
who was also an Army sergeant, and he never actually had to spank me. My older two sisters, I can't say that, but my father could give me one look, and that scared me enough that never even had to
you were
worry.
running
Never
scared.
even had to worry. Just
Yeah,
one look, and
yeah.
it was like, okay, I'm not going to open my mouth again. And that was even at 16 years old. Still would never do it. But I mean, there are instances where I'm not saying it's okay. It's something that should be promoted. But I think that sometimes, I'm not going to say it's a valuable tool, but I'm not going to say that I would say it's the worst thing in the world either. Sometimes if kids are really, really disrespectful, and I'm not even having a spank, I've been known to grab my son's ear, and he would attest to this, of don't act disrespectful to people, and I'm trying to teach them valuable lessons that I've had too from my dad. But I think way back when it was very acceptable, Nick, in all honesty.
Right. I think
My
so,
husband
too.
could tell me stories, and I say this honestly, of literally being spanked and never thought anything wrong, and yet my husband's never laid a hand on our kids. It's just
Well,
that.
I think that's one of the issues with regard to, a child's respect of their adults and the way they behave in public. I think that the idea of disciplining your children today does not really incorporate the idea of spanking your kid.
Well, look at all the
Just
talk
isn't
shows out there. There's so many talk shows where you will see repeated shows on not to spank your children, not to spank your children, not to spank your children. And, I can tell you that my mother, even at 88, if her grandchildren acted up, she would think nothing of giving them a tap on the hand. Listen,
Right.
we're in a store, we're in a
Right.
public place. If you're going to scream like that, this is the consequence. And my mom at 88, it's hard to tell her no now.
Right.
Don't do that, Mom. But I
I'm not
defer to
concerned
her.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah. But some people, it's, you know what, you've got we'll say the educated psychologist who may differ from that. So
Yeah, well, have you heard about, there's been a case just recently, just in the past few days, right? It's been on the radios and on the news. I think it's a New York case. A father disciplined his child, and he was convicted of child abuse because he spanked his child. And there was jail time involved.
that's scary though
That's
today
really
now.
scary.
It's different than it used to be.
So the father appealed to a higher court, and the higher court apparently, reversed the decision of the court, lower
Did
than
they?
it. I can see if the father really physically abused the child.
And
but-
I'm in agreement with that 1,000%. And I think there's alternate ways that it wouldn't have to be true, you know what I mean, spanking. Many times that I've said time out, you're over there, don't speak to each other, and I don't want to see you move from your spot, and that's it. And that was my way of we'll say, my punishment towards them, of this is what's going to happen. And I'm like my dad, very, very strong-willed and very tough, but I also see the point, too, of sometimes that there are kids who just, I'm not saying don't respond to it, but I don't see the pattern of, I never went and, my sisters who were spanked regularly,
Yeah.
may I say, or my husband who was literally spanked many, many times, who has never chosen to spank. It's not like a repeat thing, like sometimes they say other areas sexual abuse can recur. What I'm saying is that for parents, I don't believe the fact that, if you do it to your children, then they'll do it to their children. I don't believe that. Sometimes I think it's the individual own will of choice.
I know that if my father said cut the grass, and I didn't want to cut the grass, I wanted to go to Jerry's house and play over at Jerry's house, and my father would come home and the grass wasn't cut, there would be punishment involved, and it wouldn't be go stand in the corner for 3
I know.
minutes. So there
But
would be
I
spanking
believe
involved.
that years ago, that's the norm.
Yeah, I've never hit my kids. I'm not saying I think that there is something wrong with it, and it's probably called for. Maybe it's because my kids didn't give me reason to be infuriated like that to have to spank them. But I think that just in general today, people don't discipline their children like that. Maybe it's because they're afraid of the repercussions.
Oh, I think many cases that you've heard of, one of my family members is a social worker, and she said there's many times kids come to school and they literally will go after the parents if there's any physical abuse whatsoever. And I don't mean even physical abuse, I'm talking about a spanking for a child that may have really, really gotten out of hand or whatever happened, and yet the child can go to school and say it.
Do you think it's a result of the fact that we're in Massachusetts and Massachusetts is known as such a liberal state?
I don't know.
I bet you wouldn't be. I bet you wouldn't be the same thing if a person were, in Arizona or in Texas or Utah. I don't think they would have the same apprehension. I mean, maybe they would, but I think Massachusetts is such a liberal state,
See, I'm not, I don't, the way you follow politics, I just never do, but my thing would be that I think it's across the U.S. I'm not going to say it's the United States. I'd say it's that more than it is, because I even did a little bit of research before the show on, like, UK being, even the Europeans that fully believe in spanking their children. I was just reading articles on it.
They do or they don't?
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Right.
And it's common practice,
Right.
where here in the United States, I think it's become a little more the norm of, don't do it, there's repercussions to it. You may end up like this one gentleman, have
I think
charges
it's ridiculous.
pressed against you.
The gentleman wants to discipline his child, spanks his child, and probably some very liberally minded individual went and filed a complaint against them, and he ended up in court and he got sentenced to jail time for what, spanking his child? I don't agree.
I know, but I think
that's ridiculous.
That a lot of our viewers, especially if they're elderly, would agree that, like my mother, if she's watching now, she'd say there's nothing wrong with it. And that's the way I was brought up too. There are many times, my mom was a hairdresser.
Right.
And I'm not saying my father never had to spank me because he could give me a look. My mother, on a different hand, was I spanked by my mom if I was acting up, and she was an at-home hairdresser. That was years ago. 40, 50 years ago, that was the norm. She worked out of her home, and if I was acting up while she was doing someone's hair, I'd get the hairbrush, and I'd know what it was.
It's funny, you'd get the hairbrush, my mother would use the wooden cooking spoon.
A spoon, yep.
Yeah, and she'd let you have one, and
Yep.
I think if you did that in today's society, there'd be a problem.
Yeah, or a hairbrush for that matter.
Yeah.
My mother's hairbrush. But you know what, I see it as, I don't want to instill fear, but it taught me that, geez, I can't act out like that. In all honesty, I very infrequently did it again because I didn't want to, number one, be embarrassed by it, and number two, get spanked. So,
are there studies that you know of that have occurred that promote, or that think
I'm
that
going to say
it will
across the
continue,
U.S.,
not
the
continue?
ones that I see across the U.S., the research that I did before the show, I think that eventually it will be unacceptable, and truly in the U.S. at least, for fear of court cases or whatever, to use spanking as a means of disciplining their children. That's what it says, that's what it's coming across as, that's the research I did today on it.
I mean, I don't think that anyone should physically abuse their child.
Oh, and I agree with that 1,000%.
But you know what? A little bit of discipline, corporal punishment is not something that's hurt the youth of America today. And if you take a look at society and the values and the norms that we have, I think there needs to be somewhat of an adjustment because, I don't think that we can continue in the vein that we are. But on that note, we're going to have to head to a break right now. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about another very emotionally charged issue, the illegal immigration, and basically an update of what's happening. I mean, that's a travesty all on its own. So in any event, we're going to head to a break right now. When we come back, Senior Focus will continue. Me and Don will talk about illegal immigration.
Join us on Tuesday, September 16th for a free symposium, Living Well to 100. Open to the public, free admission, free buffet lunch, free raffle prizes, and free community resources. Call us to register at 508-459-5000. 5057 or visit us at www.theseniorfocus.com.